Hello everyone and welcome to this episode, the LnD Community One of the Women Talking About Learning podcast. I'm Andrew Jacobs. This topic has been on our schedule for some time and it was great that we could finally get around to recording it. The LnD community is known for being one of the friendliest, warmest and supportive groups, and we really strongly encourage this. We wanted to get some more views and opinions, so with this in mind, with three wonderful guests chatting through this topic. Our first guest is Anita Gouveia. Anita is an OD and learning leader who spent the last 20 plus years helping people grow, lead, and making work better for people and people better at work. She's led leadership programs, built practical and inclusive learning strategies, and coached teams across industries. Outside her day job, she volunteers as chair of the Peel Horton chapter of the Institute for Performance and Learning, where she helps connect and elevate L&D professionals. She's also a fan of improv, walks, and a good podcast. Our next guest is Sinead Hennigan. Sinead has worked in senior roles with the Learning and Development Institute in Ireland for many years. In her role as CEO, she leads the team to develop a high-value member offer and the strategic alliance of the IITD with all stakeholders. She has vast experience with individuals, corporates, further and higher education providers, as well as state agencies, and has represented the industry in an influencing and advocacy role for many years. On a voluntary basis, Sinead strategically contributes to the work of Down Syndrome Ireland, who she has represented and advocated at ministerial level, led fundraising campaigns delivering over €200,000, and contributed to doctoral research in the field of qualitative education provision for learners with special needs. Sinead sits on the GAA Alliance to Council Games for All Committee, where she's developed a framework for GAA clubs to include children and teenagers with additional needs in social and sporting activities. Our final guest is Oyindamola Ojo Eriamaite. Oyindamola is a digital learning strategist, EdTech career coach, speaker and entrepreneur with over 20 years of experience helping organisations and individuals transform how they learn and grow. A certified digital learning professional and Clinton Global Initiative Fellow, Oyindamola founded the e-learning and instructional designers hub, eLID, to mentor underrepresented professionals in EdTech. She's been recognised as a finalist in the Milton Keynes STEM Awards and served on the Learning Network UK board. Recorded in early May 2025, this is Women Talking About Learning. This is Anita, Sinead and Oyindamola talking about L&D Community.
Hello, ladies. How are you today?
I'm great. It's quite sunny outside. It's been a lovely weather for some days now. It's amazing here. Joining from the UK, by the way.
And I am joining from Dublin on a holiday weekend, so all is good here at our side as well. The weather always helps.
Sure does. I'm calling in from Toronto. So on the other side of the world there it feels, but our weather seems very similar. So what brought you guys here today to the L&D Community One?
My interest in the LnD community has been since when I was in a role as an event designer. Then I wasn't part of any community and I saw my colleagues moving faster. It was as if there was a clique. They were getting this, jobs better than me. I just felt, what's happening? Then I realized that they were in a community where they were growing together, learning things together. And then I realized that, the power of community. And that for me has been, I've had that interest since then. Be it now transitioning to tech as an L&D professional. I've been part of some communities like the L&D Shakers, the Learning Network, where last year I was part of the board directors. The growth that I experienced and the support, the connections, the network has been amazing, which led me to start my own community where I help people from underrepresented background transition to tech, EdTech to be specific. So it's been amazing, the impact that I have experienced. And the joy that I have seeing people being impacted, being part of the community has been amazing. And that's why when I saw this, when I heard about the podcast about the community, when I knew I had to be on board. And I'm happy to be here, to be with you ladies and to learn from you and know about your experience as well.
Well, I think that's great because really ultimately that's what it's about. You never stop learning. And um, I've been in my role for 25 years. Can you believe that? But it doesn't feel like 25 years because I think learning and development particularly is something which is evolving all the time, and it evolves as the world evolves and business evolves, and we have seen such incredible disruption in the world in the last 25 years. And I think it's been very interesting in my role to see how learning and development has evolved with that, and how learning and development professionals have evolved with that as well. And I think it's interesting because I had a particular moment about 7 or 8 years ago where I said, "Oh God, I've stayed in this role too long, and should I move on?" Not because I wanted to move on. I absolutely loved my role. I loved learning and development. I loved working in this industry. I love the people I work with. But I did wonder, um, was it the best thing for the organization for me to continue to stay in the role, having been there for so long? And I sought out the advice of a really clever HR academic who regularly appears on Thinkers 50 and all of that. And I said to him, I think I'm going to have to leave. I think I just don't know if you can be effective, if you can stay in the same role all your life. And he said to me, you can stay in the same role all your life as long as you're effective. And then I said to myself, how do you know if you're effective? And I think as long as you keep asking that question, how do you know if you're effective? And I decided at that point, now I had done a master's before, but I decided to do an MBA because I thought it would be a really good filter for me to expose myself to new theories, new thinking, but particularly to other people who are in other contexts and other organizations, so that I could get the value of peer learning. And almost all of those things combined would be a filter for me to kind of benchmark myself against what's happening in other organizations and what are other senior leaders doing.
Sinead, you bring up something really important. Like, you reached out to someone in your community or someone you trusted, right? And that's part of being a community, right? That you can go to someone with questions, with issues, with problems. And I had similar to that where I was kind of questioning, like, is this still what I want to do? Like, am I in the right place doing the right thing? And I too reached out to my community of network individuals. And I think that's the power where you can get insight. And isn't that what community does? Is not only people who think like us, because that's not what we want necessarily, but someone who understands what we're going through, the field, the world, like it's so nice to be able to talk to someone who gets it, right? Where we don't need to explain it. So I think one of the first places where I experienced community, and it's Sinead, this is where you're working, well, though on the other side of the world, is the Institute for Performance and Learning. It's the association here in Canada for professionals. And that was, over 20 years ago when I first, connected with them. And it's like, Mondamola, that's like you, right? It's like, I'm alone here at work. I'm the only one in L&D, so I'm expected to be the subject matter expert. But who do I go to for questions, for advice, for help? So I connected with the association, and I've been a part of them since. But they were my first community where I can reach out to outside of the organization.
Mhm. I think it's important as well to be constantly reflecting and to try and understand what is the most beneficial and appropriate intervention at different times. So sometimes it is mentoring, and sometimes it's education, and sometimes it's conversation. And I think you learn all of these different opportunities are learning opportunities, and it's just important to be continuously asking yourself, what do I need now at this particular point?
Yeah. Um, Talking about the power of community, where you have to differentiate between community and network, I would say being part of a community, based on my own experience, has been very, very useful for me, and it's been quite very, very impactful. I started my own business as a freelancer recently, well, a little over a year now. And just like Anita mentioned, there are times that you're just alone, working alone, and you're wondering, how do I start? How am I sure that the SOP that I have is standard? How do I know that the contract that I have is the right one? And being part of different LND communities has helped me a great deal to just pop in a question in the chat, and you get different opinions, you get different um documents being sent to you, and it just helps you feel confident. There have been situations where I needed to be sure about the price that I was quoting for, you know, a gig, and just putting in that message in the chat helped me a great deal. So being part of a community, I would say, is a very, very useful one. It's really great. It makes you feel like you're part of a family. It helps you grow faster. You're not alone. Even though you're alone, you're not alone. You feel that support. You're able to have access to resources, encouragement at times. I've been in a community which is called Women In, where one of the members, who is a coach, just put in a message one day and said, I'm a coach and I have free slots for anyone that needs someone to talk to. Imagine how useful that is. So being part of a community is like being part of a family, and not just in a network where you can't really reach out to people. So it's been really amazing for me. What about you, ladies? How has it been?
I mean, I love what you said there too, especially about resources. Like you go into the community, and then that's, I think, that nuance there with networking where you're there just, get to know people. Community is deeper, right? Like there's more of a connection that you establish that you could be a little bit more vulnerable with. But those resources thing, that's what I find the most about, I don't know, especially the L&D community. We are so giving with our time, with our resources, maybe to a fault sometimes. Um, but I find that this community, it's like, oh, I'm struggling here. Well, here's a template I've used, or, here's something I've got. Like, hey, here's my first chapter that I'm writing for free. Have a look. Like, I don't know. I feel like our community, especially, could be like that everywhere. And I'm sure it is within communities, because I think that's the power of them. But I find, especially with LMD, super helpful.
I noticed that too because in my role, I work with a membership organisation, so I have that privilege of having a touch point with thousands of L&D
Mm,
professionals across all different sectors, all different organisations, and often members would come to us to try and signpost them. They'd say, look, we've got this
right.
problem. Do you know anybody? And I continuously make this point, and it is the one thing I have observed over the years, the spirit of generosity that is within the learning and development community. And I think it comes with the territory of imparting knowledge and sharing and learning. I think it just that becomes an endemic in you. But I feel that that piece about the community is and I think learning and development is interesting in this context because number of over the decades, if you like, um, the what an organization needs from people has almost evolved. There was the sort of HRM, the management of people, and that's where learning and development sat in there among that, but it was not really that visible at times. But I think over the years, as the whole talent agenda has evolved and the strategic imperative of skills capability and having great people who have got the knowledge and skills that organizations need. That has brought the HRD, the development of people, the learning and development to the fore. And I think there has been a little bit of tension, between the traditional HR people and the learning and development people to see, hello, we are here as well in our own right. And I think there's where the community comes in, that you're kind of we found our own tribe here. And I would notice that, and I don't know, do either of you notice that you go to the HR conferences but I found over the years, I know fewer and fewer people there. Whereas when you go to the L&D events, there are now core L&D events, and you feel this is my community. It becomes part of your identity as an L&D professional.
Yes, I can't even say that enough, Sinead. Like, yes, I don't know how invigorating I feel just to be like, I'm with my people, right? And
Yeah.
that's so important in community, right? How have you seen our L&D community shift over the years in your experience, either of you?
Well, I would notice two things. That is one piece that I think learning and development as a profession is evolving in its own right through its own channel. The other thing I notice is that it is now like it used to be a sort of a second destination career, if you like. Like you kind of start off with some other subject matter expertise, and then over time, you almost came to learning and development through the training route. Whereas now you see, young career professionals coming off grad programs, and they are moving into learning and development roles right from the beginning of their career. So it's very much now a career in its own right. You see young people moving into learning and development through technology roles or content creation, and it's no longer tied into that sort of vocational piece around just training. So there are two things I notice.
Yeah, talking about technology, that has been a great shift. We now have a lot of learning technologies that people, and they keep evolving. It's amazing the way you have different tools coming up for video creation, for you know um, the authoring tools, even collaboration tools. It's amazing the shift in technology.
Yeah, that actually I think, our pandemic, recent pandemic really accelerated that. And that's what I found. A lot of my communities I felt were in person, going to events, whether they were conferences, and of course the chats. But I did feel like the pandemic propelled this online community, like so many more online communities, like, the global learning and development community that John Hinchcliffe had started. That was one of my very first large scale global community where I was able to now not just connect with people in Canada, but now I was had access to all these, individuals from around the world. And it was wonderful. It was so great to get different perspectives, especially culturally, right? Isn't that so important to get that? Because if we're always hanging out with people who think the same as us, like, is that really a learning community,
Mhm.
right?
But even back to then to kind of link up those two things about we were just talking about the communities and the technology. The like technology now has made the world so small, and we have all of these virtual communities. I mean, we can do this so easily. We're all over the world, and we're essentially in the same room. And I think that is one of the things that the capacity for people to come together, to share, to be in conversations, to bridge all the time zones, to share, like using tools and different um, platforms and that to kind of to share and to create these different communities of practice. Technology has been a huge enabler of that. The other thing I would say that I have noticed over the years is the sort of very explicit acknowledgement of, learning cultures within organizations, and a very deliberate intention to create learning organizations. And you'd notice it, I notice it in sort of where L&D sits in organizations now. And I think sometimes you see very successful learning cultures emerging where L&D is sitting under engagement, that they're using learning and development opportunities to get really good engagement from their workforce.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. There's not so much focus on off the shelf content being delivered to people. There's now more intentionality about um, designing your learning with people at the center of it, being people focused, understanding what the people's need really are. And at times, you get to wonder if training is really the solution to the problem at that point in time. So,
Like you kind of like shifted a little bit of my thinking there with your last point, like is that the solution? And I feel like this is too where community comes in, where so many of us struggle with that in our organizations is how do we have that seat at the table? How do we, influence behavior and influence decisions that are being made? And I feel like that's where if I could have others who are struggling with me who can give me advice, who can give me their opinions, who could share what's worked with them, that that's certainly helped in building just our confidence, like just internal confidence and knowing that I'm not alone, but also knowing how can I approach this.
Yeah. Can we talk about how women are being affected by, the effect of communities on women, highlighting the challenges and opportunities for women in this space? Is this something that we can, key into this discussion?
Great question. I think for a lot of communities, especially perhaps maybe tech or, where you're not, woman isn't a majority. But I do feel like my learning and development community, I guess because it's that HR type of field where it's linked in, there's a lot more women. So for me personally, I have not really felt that my community hasn't empowered me as a woman enough. I feel very connected. I feel very supported. Where it changes is then when I go back into the workforce, then that tends to be more male focused. And then I do feel like my voice isn't heard enough. So it's almost like I gotta go back to the community to go get some more confidence and I go back to work. That's been my experience, at least. I don't know if that for you.
Yeah, I agree with you about the fact that as women, we face extra pressure to prove ourselves in L&D, especially in leadership or tech heavy spaces. And just like you mentioned, Anita, communities, the communities that I've been part of have helped me a great deal in offering a safe space to share, to grow, and to lead. Take for example, I've been invited by the L&D Shakers community, as well as being part of the learning network. I've had the opportunity to plan and deliver events. I've had the opportunity to do, to organize events online and even in person. And talking about delivering webinars, delivering workshops, it has grown my confidence a great deal. I see myself constantly growing and becoming more and more confident as I get exposed to this, to engage with people in those communities. How about you, Sinead?
Well, I just sometimes think about, how the world of work has evolved, and as part, since the pandemic, and then how the communities have evolved with that. And I think the hybrid working, the easy access to technology, um the amount of time that people are spending the kind of remote working or in the office, those lines have become blurred now between sort of what's your demarked workspace and what's your demarked home space. And I think in that sense that it is great to have those communities, but I do think sometimes you've got so many competing priorities that you do have to try and put some discipline around it and make sure that you kind of you know look after yourself in all of that, and that you don't become like you the point you were making about having to feel that you have to prove yourself. I do think that sometimes there's a sense that you have to prove yourself, but also I think sometimes you have to talk yourself into a space where you also back yourself, if you like, and that you have that level of self belief, and that you trust your own judgment and trust your instincts, and know that we are strong as leaders, and um, I think, particularly now where we need organizations to have an appetite for risk, because that's where the growth is going to come from. Um, and women need to be confident to lead organizations in that way. And particularly when the sort of clarity that we used to have around the direction of travel isn't there anymore now, because everything is in such a state of flux. But we need to be confident and to make sure that we do trust ourselves, and that we believe that our judgment is correct.
Agree with everything you both said. My mind started shifting a little bit as you were talking about that, about the amplifying of voices and things like that. And my brain almost went to, isn't that sometimes the downfall of some communities where then you get these really strong voices that tend to like come up and that's all you're hearing in the space is from a selected few, perhaps thought leaders in space or highly influential, or maybe just the ones that, are the loudest. Um, do you see that as like, you know, I guess, downfall or negative to a community perhaps? Or how do we shift that? Or maybe it's just my experience sometimes.
Well, to answer your question, I'll like to build on what Sinead said earlier about you feeling confident in yourself. You know, there's a tendency, like you mentioned, when you're in certain communities, it looks like that a group of people that are being celebrated and the ones that, but at times I feel when you feel confident in yourself and you put yourself forward, that would that could help. I can share an example like when I joined the Learning Network. There was in the Learning Network, every year there's an opportunity to become a part of the board directors. And I just thought, why not do it? Why not try it? I could have just sat behind and thought, it's not meant for someone like me. Maybe nobody would vote me in. But I gave it a shot. And as it happened, I was elected in by people that did not even know me. And all I had to do was do a campaign, talk about my resume, talk about the benefit and the value I was bringing to the community and how I was going to do that. And people saw that, that in me. They saw that I could bring in the value based on my experience and all that. And I was voted in. And I served for 1 year. And I happened to be one of those names that were celebrated that year. But if I did not summon courage to put myself forward, I would have just sat behind. I thought, it's not meant for me. I can't beat that person. So I think to a great extent, we as women need to get to the point where we celebrate our wins. We need to
Mm.
look ourselves and look at your resume, look at your experience, what you've achieved, and tell yourself it's enough. I can be celebrated too. And many of these things just need to put yourself forward. If there's an opportunity, I'm sure if you're a member of a community, there are times where you get opportunities to come and deliver a webinar, deliver, a workshop. Just put yourself up, and what could go wrong? It's either they say no or yes. But most of the times, communities are driven by volunteers, and there's always a need for someone to help and be and deliver some value. And when you're doing that, then people can see the value you have. People can see your competency. You might even get an opportunity to speak even on a global stage from that. So, like I said, like Sinead said, you just need to put yourself forward. You just need to believe in yourself and trust that you are good enough. Yeah.
Because sometimes some of the narrative and the discourse can almost become self-fulfilling prophecy. The narrative around, well, it's harder for women, or women have more demands, or, women don't have enough time, or, women are primarily the caregivers at home. I mean, who says this? Because if you sometimes you have to work to make sure that you do create the space for yourself to succeed. And I think all leaders at the moment are, you have to lead with humanity, you have to work on building trust. That's men and women. So I don't think that it's necessarily the case that we have to buy into all of that narrative. I mean, I think everybody is subject to the same kind of demands. So I think it's up to women to make sure that they hold that space for themselves, and don't allow themselves to be sort of drawn into that those limitations simply because that's the narrative that's out there.
That's so difficult to do, right? Isn't it? I mean,
Mm,
just that emotional pull, like that self-confidence that you have to have. Like it's one thing, like I hear you. We got to put ourselves out there. I mean, just me being here today is me putting myself out there. I'm
Oh,
feeling
absolutely.
uncomfortable, right?
yeah,
But I know I have to do that. But then there's a
yeah.
part of me that's like, why can't I just be heard without having to push myself to some limit? Like it's this, that yin and yang, or that paradox. I don't know. Like, and then you see other people do things online, which is great that communities have now gone online can expand. But I don't know about you, but I know sometimes for me, it's like imposter syndrome, or what
Mm.
can I add to this? Like, these people are so much better, smarter. Look at everything they're
Yeah,
doing. I can't even compare, but I know we're not
yeah.
supposed to. I I I get that. Um,
But I also think sometimes you become overwhelmed by the sort of the other, all these communities and networks. What we've been saying here about, the technology has made the world small and we can now have communities everywhere if we want. Actually, sometimes you can become overwhelmed by the scale of your community that you don't actually know how to engage meaningfully. So, you can have 500 plus connections, but actually, how connected are you with any of those people? And I remember seeing a model once where they talked about a number of different kind of key roles that you would feel you need in your life. So you might decide, there are 5 or 10 key roles you need. Perhaps if you're going into business, or maybe you need a connector, or sometimes we need a nerve giver, or you need an advocate, or you need, and maybe to really think about just a small number of people that you could really focus on building quality relationships with them that are mutually beneficial. And perhaps I think today you're going to be my nerve giver, but maybe tomorrow I could be your connector. And I think that if some people maybe don't know how to actually sort of be in a community, but perhaps that's a way to start, to just say, I'm only going to focus on really nurturing these 5 or 6 key relationships and trying to derive some quality and to give quality.
That's awesome advice, Sinead. Like, I love that. And I like just start small. And I think that's where the difference between a network and a community. You don't need to be, is like you said, is that 500 people that you're a part of in the community? Are they really your connection? And that's where it's like, no, that's just part of a network, which you can reach out and those are fantastic. But like you said, narrow it down. You don't need to belong to every L&D community out there, but pick the ones that maybe really resonate with your passion and your strengths.
Yeah. So true, you have to be intentional about what community you join. Not every community is for you, honestly.
And I think you sign up to so many things, and the next thing your inbox is full with, all their newsletters. And what
Yeah.
do? You just delete them. You don't
Yeah.
engage at all. So, in
Unsubscribe.
fact, what is the point? So honestly, and there's a bit of FOMO. Oh my goodness, I better stay involved with this because I might need them in the future. But actually, I have never used them yet. So, maybe it's time to start narrowing the funnel a little bit and to really start nurturing the relationships that you have, or harvesting some new ones that you feel perhaps can support you to fill some gaps or needs that you might have.
That's a great point. I'm part of an OD community. It's a
Hmm.
local one. We're at the point. It's been a couple years, but we're almost at the point now. I don't know what it is, but it's almost like, is it time to split? Like, have has it served its purpose? Or is it time that maybe there's new members that we need to actively go out to bring new voices to the table? Because at this point, it's just, we're the same voices and we've uh, perhaps, maybe, I don't know, learned what we've needed to learn. But I think that's a really good point is knowing when to leave, when it serves your purpose,
Yeah.
when it fuels you, right?
Yeah. True. Talking about people who are not in communities, what advice do you have for them?
Well, I think back to the point we were just making there. Like in another with another hat on, I do quite a bit of fundraising. I'm very involved with the charity, and often people would say, "Oh, I don't know how to. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't do anything. I wouldn't know how to do that." Everybody can do something. Like I think every people think I don't really know anybody, or everybody knows somebody. And I think all you've got to do is scroll through your phone, think about the different things you're involved in your life. It's back to that point that we were making earlier about the blurred lines. Like people are involved in things that they wouldn't consider to be related to their core work, but actually you can build your community there and acquire learning and skills that you can transfer into other aspects of your life. So I think you need to think about your life and your activity in their totality, and understand how you can kind of cross pollinate things that will yield results for you elsewhere.
Yeah. And I also think that joining a community should be something you consider if it aligns with your goals? Do you have the goals of putting yourself out there, building a brand, and then in joining a community and offering to volunteer as a speaker and do some other things? Is it going to give you that visibility that you need? Or is your goal that you need to learn more? Do you want to increase your network? Joining the community should be around you have a goal that you want to achieve, and joining a community is going to help you achieve that. And then you need to consider, what community do I want to join? What happens in there? Who are the people in there? How are they going? What value am I going to get being part of that community? What value am I bringing in? And then there's the other side of you starting a community on your own. Do you wish that there's a problem that should be solved, which a community can solve, and there is no community doing that? I think you have that passion to do that. Do you think you have the bandwidth, the strength to do that? Are you considering starting your own community? I mean, these are questions that you want to think about
Mm.
when we're talking about joining a community or starting one and being part of one. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you bring a really good point there. Um, that communities are about what value you can bring, but what value you can get. So I do think it's a give and take. You
Mhm,
shouldn't join a
mhm,
community if all you want to do is take from that
mhm.
community. Um, but also, what can you bring? What value can you bring forward, and the best that you can? So I think, all of that, joining a community for your purpose, what you want to gain, but also what can you give back?
Mm. And I think as well, like people who are in the business of learning, um, they engage in that spirit of reciprocity anyway. I think it just becomes innate. But I think once you are prepared to, you know, be agile and be prepared to continuously evolve and grow and to use learning as the enabler of that, I think,
Love.
you'll always feel that you're in a good place.
What a great way to end, Sinead.
So it's been an amazing time with you ladies of, getting to know about you, Anita and Sinead, and learning from you. It's been a great time with you.
Thank you to both. I feel like I've just expanded my community, so this is wonderful. Thank you both.
Well, I was just going to make that point too. We're now like a little community in our own right, learning from each other. Yes, it's been a really good conversation. Thanks very much to you both.
We're always delighted to get new guests on the podcast, and we love that this was properly global, Canadian, Irish and UK. This was such an enjoyable listen. I'm sure it's one that we'll come back to again and again. What really stood out to us was the massive positive sharing energy from the podcast, and an enormous thank you to Anita, Sinead, and Damola for their time and great conversation. Their contact details are in the show notes, along with links to our website, future episodes, and to our donation page. We'll be back in a couple of weeks, and next time it's the education one. As always, thanks for listening, and we'll see you again soon.